In Isaiah 66, it says, "And it shall come to pass," verse 23, "from one new moon to another, from one Sabbath to another, shall all flesh come to worship before me, saith the Lord. And they shall go forth and look upon the carcasses of men that have transgressed against me, for their worm shall not die, neither shall their fire be quenched. There shall be a whoring to all flesh." Now the question is, this is there in the new heaven, new earth. Is this eternal? Now, my next part of the question is in Revelation 22. And it says that they won't, blessed are they do his commandments, for they have right to the tree of life. They may enter the city of gates of the city, without our dogs and sorcerers, whoremongers, and so forth. The question is there a purpose for an eternal place where people can see on this earth forever? Or is this just during a particular time?
All right, Isaiah chapter 66. Now in Isaiah chapter 66, the passage there is talking about eternity, at least as far as verse 22 is concerned. "For the new heaven and the new earth which I will make," and that's a reference to Revelation 20, verse 1 to 3, "shall remain before me, saith the Lord. So shall your seed," that's verse 21, the Jews, "and your name," that's the Jews, "remain." So the Jew remains on the new earth out there in eternity. The earth is given to Abraham, he says in Romans chapter 4. Then he says in 23, "It shall come to pass from one new moon to another," that's a Jewish feast, "and from one Sabbath to another," that's a Jewish feast, "shall all flesh," that shows there's flesh out in eternity, "come to worship before me, saith the Lord." He's in New Jerusalem. "And they shall go forth," the ones that come there in flesh, "and look upon the carcasses of the men which have transgressed against me, for their worm shall not die, neither shall the fire be quenched, and they shall be an abhorring unto all flesh." The passage to stand looks like there is in eternity a remnant or a memorial of sin where a fellow can see somebody in hell. Now the problem comes, and it's quite a problem he asked about, the problem comes with 24, "Look upon the carcasses of the men." A carcass is a dead body. And the question comes, are there going to be dead bodies out there in eternity? Now the passage in Revelation chapter 20 says that death and hell go in the lake of fire. Revelation chapter 20, verse 14. So that's the end of death. You don't have anybody dying in eternity. So if there's any carcasses there, it's the carcass of somebody who died somewhere before the new heaven and the new earth started. It's a memorial. Now, as far as the people in hell goes, where the worm dieth not and the fire is not quenched, they're there. But those aren't carcasses. Revelation chapter 22, verse 15. Revelation 22, 15. They're still in the lake of fire in eternity. But those aren't carcasses. Revelation 22, 15. "For without are dogs, sorcerers, whoremongers, and murderers, and whoever loves and maketh a lie." Compare this with chapter 21. Chapter 21, verse 8. "In the new heaven and the new earth. But the fearful and unbelieving, and abominable and murderers, and whoremongers, and sorcerers, and idolaters, and all liars," there it is, "all liars shall have their part in the lake which burneth with fire and brimstone, which is the second death." So you have in eternity souls in the lake of fire, and the fire isn't quenched, and they're abhorring to all flesh. But then you have in the passage you just read also carcasses somewhere. Now I'm going to have to guess what I'm talking about, but I'm going to guess from this. You get Colossians chapter 2 in one hand, and get Ezekiel chapter 46 in the other. You're told here that in the millennium on this earth, that the Jews in Israel will be observing the new moons and the Sabbaths. Get Colossians chapter, should be Ezekiel 45. Ezekiel 45 and Colossians chapter 2. And the passage you read in Isaiah said, "From one new moon to another, and from one Sabbath to another." Right, Ezekiel 45 and Colossians chapter 2. Colossians chapter 2, Paul is talking about something in the future. Colossians 2, verse 16. Colossians 2:16, "Let no man therefore judge you in meat," that's the Jewish ordinance, "or in drink," that's the Jewish ordinance, "or in respect of a holy day," Jewish ordinance, "or the new moon," there it is, "or the Sabbath days," there it is, "which are a shadow of things to come," in the future. All right, now Ezekiel chapter 45, and this passage on the millennium. In Ezekiel chapter 45, verse 16, and when Christ is on this earth in the millennium, there is also on this earth, evidently, a prince. If we compare the Scripture with Scripture, that prince would be David. And we read this in Ezekiel 45:16. All the people of the land shall give this oblation for the prince in Israel. And it shall be the prince's part to give burnt offerings and meat, there's the Jewish offering, and drink offerings, there's the Jewish ordinance, in the feasts, there's Colossians, and the new moons, there's Colossians, and the Sabbaths, there's Colossians. Watch it carefully. In all solemnities of the house of Israel. So the passage there in over Isaiah has specific reference to what's on this earth for the nation of Israel in the new heaven and the new earth, and not what's necessarily out in space. He shall prepare the sin offering, the meat offering, the burnt offering, and the peace offerings to make reconciliation, not for the sinner, not for the sin of the sinner, taken care of at Calvary, for the house of Israel. There's a national offering, a national atonement for a nation being offered there. So if I was going to guess on the application of the passage, I would say this. I would say out in eternity, there's a lake of fire in eternity, and that lake of fire, the soul of the unsaved, the worm dieth not, the fire is not quenched. But those aren't carcasses. They're not carcasses in the first place because the body in eternity, the body an unsaved man has, will not be a body that has arms and legs anyway. And secondly, a body out in hell would not be referred to as a carcass. A carcass is a dead body. And looks like that in eternity out there on the new earth, where the Jew is, but out there south of Edom, where the lake of fire is going to be in the millennium, there will be the carcasses of the men that sinned against the Lord before eternity started. And there'll be a memorial for sin against God. Yes, sir.
Nothing like a Bible to clear up a college education.